Nice. All right. Welcome to the Sweet Science of Fighting podcast. Today we have Thomas Barbeau. Welcome, Thomas.
How's it going? Great to be here.
No, it's going well. Thank you for coming on. All right. So today we have, I guess, kind of outside of combat sports, we have one that's working in the NFL with the Carolina Panthers. And people might be thinking, okay, American football, combat sports, not too much, I guess, similar in terms of preparation, but there's a lot of crossover regarding, I guess, power athletes, but there's also a lot of crossover in terms of short preparation times where some fighters might find themselves being called up to fight within a few weeks, which Thomas has to deal with every season now. So do you want to maybe provide a brief background about yourself and then we can dive in?
So yeah, my name is Thomas Barbeau. I'm an assistant strength coach with the Carolina Panthers. This is going into my third season. Prior to that, I was at Baylor University. I was a full-time strength coach for a year there. And then I was a grad student for a year and a half there. And before that, I was the head strength coach at a Division III school in New Hampshire called Plymouth State for a year. So I'm young, but it's good.
So you've gone through a few of the grades then, a few of the different stages.
And a huge variety. Like when I was at Plymouth State, I had 16 teams by myself, so I trained the wrestlers.
Oh my gosh!
So a little bit of combat sports, but I also trained lacrosse and hockey and women's hockey and a big variety.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah. It's always good to have a variety of athletes under your belt as well, a variety of sports. And a lot of people don't realize that the principles of strength conditioning apply, across the spectrum.
No,
it doesn't matter if you're in whatever sport, you can apply these principles throughout.
No question. It's always it's the same, maybe the methods change slightly. In the conditioning world, your work to rest ratios change. What you're preparing for them for changes, but it's a human. A human is a human. We don't have to be veterinarians. You don't have a whole society. You just got the same species.
Yeah, that's very true. That's very true. All right, let's jump straight into, I guess, short turnarounds. I think this is the one thing. It's not exclusive to the NFL. I know the EPL and soccer also have, I think, a ridiculous, only 4-week preseason before they play a whole year of matches. Within the NFL, you mentioned you guys have a 2-week preseason before you start preseason games, which, I guess that's why you see the injury stats kind of get blown out of proportion because you guys have no actual prep time to get them ready for these preseason games. So do you want to maybe cover, I guess, your philosophy around how you're preparing guys in those 2 weeks without burying them come preseason games?
So, well, a couple things. One, they have the opportunity to train on their own. So that's, we educate them. We send them all the information that we're allowed to. Everything is voluntary. Everything is optional, but we give them all of the information. And then we'll even tell them, their GPS data. And that's really what how we prepare them for camp. We use an undulating volume calculations for everything we do. And then we build them up to be prepared for what they're going to experience week 1 of training camp or week 2 of training camp.
Gotcha.
And then that way, you're not blowing them out of the water. And hopefully you can build some sort of chronic workload, some sort of capacity for the high-speed yardage, for the changes of direction, for the efforts they're going to have to make. So I would say that's how we tackle it mainly. But then...
do you have guys that don't do anything and they have to come in week 1?
I'm sure we do. So that's why. So the first day of training camp in the NFL is traditionally a conditioning test, and you have to be smart with it because you don't want to have injuries because you made your conditioning test so hard. But you can really tell too. A guy starts running if it's rep 4 and they look bad, okay, this is going to take some work. But I am sure there are guys that don't do anything. Now, some of them are lucky too because this is the 1% of the 1%, and they are absolutely mutants. So some of them can not do anything, and they're totally fine.
Oh yeah. I saw an interview. I can't remember what player it was, and he was talking about how he drinks a coffee and then he eats a bag of candy for dinner. And 1 meal, and that's his diet. And he's 200 something pounds. Things are running back, just jacked.
I know Marshawn Lynch. He was famous for eating Skittles all the time. Oh yeah, it's
Some people are just lucky, eh?
their mom and dad are way cooler than my mom and dad. That's for sure.
So for anyone listening, you are not these genetic freaks.
No.
So don't copy what they do.
You would have already been found if you were.
Yeah, exactly. So say a fighter calls up, he's got maybe 2, 3, 4 weeks to prepare for this fight. He's been training leading up to this, but not with any real intensity because it's kind of out of camp. How would you then approach, you can use football, American football as an example, how you kind of do it there. I guess it all kind of transfers over. But then how would you look to set out that maybe 2, 3 or 4 week period going into a competition so you can essentially maximize the training to transfer over versus combating having too much fatigue going into that competition?
So, yeah, I think what I would do is if I knew I had 2, 3 weeks, and I don't know exactly what metrics you have, what you're tracking in the fighting world, but I would say that my first week I would want more volume, not a crazy amount of volume, probably like a little over a third of the total volume that I'm going to have for the 3 week period. I probably want a little over a third, and I'm going to have moderate intensity, a little bit higher volume. Then the second week, I'm going to increase the intensity, and I'm probably going to decrease the total volume of stressors. And then that'll put me into the third week, hopefully the most prepared. That can be whatever it is, the amount of time sparring versus the intensity sparring, the running, whatever you are using, the biking. That would be and the other thing that a piece of technology, like especially in combat sports, that I think is super valuable are the Moxy monitors. So I don't know if you would, like that is.
I haven't used, but I've read lots of bits and pieces on it, and I want to get one eventually.
Yeah,
dive into that.
Could not, especially in a sport like fighting, I think that is absolutely the most valuable because you can really track. Like it shows you oxygen saturation, total hemoglobin. Then you wear a heart rate monitor. It shows you your heart rate. So in something like combat sports, you'll be able to see when the athlete is not resaturating or able to completely desaturate oxygen. So you would know you can cut your workout when you're no longer resaturating, and then you don't go in the tank. You only have 2 weeks. You cannot overtrain in you can't afford to overtrain in 2 weeks because you got to train and peak. So it's like, if the goal is an aerobic workout, well, I'm training for the aerobic workout, and the second my adaptation is no longer aerobic, I'm done because I'm not gaining anything more from that day. In my situation and in our situation, that's really hard to do because we have 90 guys. You're preparing, especially at the beginning of training camp. By the end, you have 53 guys, but you can't have 53 Moxy monitors being around at once. And in a sport like football, all the pads, that doesn't work. But in a one-on-one setting, I think that it would be invaluable.
Do you want to maybe dive into explaining some of those concepts, maybe for someone who's not quite sure of oxygen saturation, desaturation, all that kind of stuff? Kind of maybe a high-level overview of what you're looking at and trying to achieve with it?
So oxygen and PCR are connected. When oxygen depletes, PCR depletes. As oxygen returns, PCR recovers, right? And we always think of ATP being the energy source, but ATP just allows you to relax. It's the calcium that allows you to contract. So the best athletes are the ones that relax the best. That's what the coordination is, really. They have the ability to relax and recover. Everybody can contract more or less the same.
Yeah.
So with this monitor, you get lines on the screen, and it shows you the total hemoglobin levels. So that's the amount of blood. As you exercise, that increases slightly to a certain point. You have nitric oxide, you have these things that increase blood flow. And then what will happen is with an intense contraction, you'll get an occlusion. So say like 30 to 50% intensity of a contraction, you'll get venous occlusion. So blood cannot get out. So then it's like you have a hose, the back end of the hose gets clogged, and then the blood flow keeps coming in, and you'll see more total hemoglobin. Then above 50% contraction, you'll get arterial occlusion. So both ends of the hose get plugged, and now oxygen levels not oxygen. total hemoglobin levels will not change. It's the same amount of blood. At the same time, oxygen is being used. So my oxygen saturation levels, I'm exercising, they're going to decrease. I am getting more and more blood flow, so hopefully it's decreasing at a slower rate. Then I have an intense contraction. I start to deplete oxygen as blood flow increases because I have that arterial occlusion. Then I have a very intense contraction, arterial occlusion, no more change in blood flow, but that the oxygen is still getting taken out of it, and I'm going to have a steeper decrease. Does that make sense?
Gotcha. That's all within the muscle, correct?
Correct. Yes, that is at the muscular level. So when I'm looking at this Moxy monitor, I am putting it on, for example, vastus lateralis, or I'm putting it on deltoid, like a rear delt, and then I'm seeing exactly what is happening.
Nice. So I guess let's look at maybe some practical, uses for this in training. So what are you looking at to essentially stop the session or even stop the rep? And then are you also using it to dictate recovery periods between maybe intervals on the bag or whatever it is?
So when you start the exercise, you'll see the oxygen levels. When they warm up, you'll see them rise up a little, and as you warm up, like we talked about, you have increased blood flow. But then when you're watching, you're going to see the oxygen desaturate. So oxygen at max effort exercise, oxygen desaturates in 17 seconds, plus or minus 3. Your more fast twitch guys will be a little faster. They'll be closer to 14 seconds. Now, for me in my setting here, that is super valuable. I know that a max effort of 15 seconds, that's all they got. So if we're doing bike sprints and I do anything more than 15 seconds, I'm just having a glycolytic effect. I'm just causing more fatigue than. So that's something I think super valuable, super applicable, not even needing the monitor. But then, sorry, go ask.
No, you go, Carol.
But then the other things are like, so I'm exercising, the oxygen desaturates, and then I watch it come back in recovery. So instead of starting your athlete early, so we talked about we don't want to overtrain, you can wait for them to completely resaturate. You can wait for breathing levels to return back towards normal, and then you do your next set. So you're not just digging them deeper, putting them into survival mode.
Yeah. So that's almost like you could do your alactic intervals using the Moxy monitor. Then you just look at desaturation as soon as it hits the bottom. Stop. It'll probably be 10 to 15 seconds. Stop, and then let it recover. And that way you're not digging into that anaerobic lactic area where you're building up all those waste products, etc. And
exactly. And if you want to build up the lactic products, if you want to do that, well, then you can watch that happen too, and then you know that's happening. Yeah. The value in it is it's happening.
yeah, and you can measure it precisely instead of kind of guessing through arbitrary time limits. Because obviously, because we don't always have access to things like this, so we like to prescribe, hey, alactic power efforts we want around 6 seconds or 8 seconds. Then alactic capacity, we're looking at like 10 to 15, and then maybe lactic stuff we're looking at like 20 to plus to whatever. So it kind of gives us, hey, this person, we can get an individual reading for them to be like, okay, this is alactic for them, rather than kind of giving an arbitrary, time.
100%. It lets you be specific to them.
Hopefully so.
I think for combat sports, invaluable. And in the team sports setting, knowing the better understanding of the the bioenergetics, it lets you make better decisions. And also, you do it with one athlete who's here in the off season that wants to try it on their bike conditioning or whatever, and then you see I think it gives you a better coach's eye, because when you look at the fatigue now, I'm seeing how you're breathing, I'm seeing how you're acting. Well, you're probably not the only one. So now I see all of my athletes breathing like this, whatever, and this is probably what's happening at a bioenergetic level.
So how much then are you, emphasizing or focusing on that bioenergetic or energy system development, like looking at a pure physiological approach to the conditioning, say, for your NFL guys, versus maybe looking at more of an output-based I guess, progression where you're just looking more at like work capacity? How can I repeat, I guess, these explosive efforts over and over? Is it, I
understand.
blend these things together?
I think it depends on the year. It's an annual plan-based thing. In February when it's the beginning of the off season and you're sending home your optional training, you have some guys here that is more looking at something like the Moxy. We're trying to have more aerobic adaptation. We're doing more aerobic circuits. You're trying to restore range of motion, all of those things with it. But that is when I would do more of the bioenergetic approach. That's
so that'd be like your GPP kind of thing. That's like you're looking at energy
because the goal of the GPP, right, is to increase all of your capacities. So now I just worry about the specifics of the capacities. When I get more close to sporting time, whether that's the last month of the off season prior to OTAs, or the 2 weeks that we have of strength and conditioning only prior to OTAs, or the 6 weeks right now prior to training camp, that's when you worry about the sport-specific work-to-rest ratios. For us, that's 5 to 7 seconds on. In the NFL, it's around 6 seconds on. In college, it might be 6 to 7 because the plays are a little longer, and it's 35 to 40 seconds off. So then you are training them for that specifically.
Yeah. Now I want to dive into that a bit. So that will be the average, correct? That's like the average work-to-rest ratio. Okay, so how do you then, obviously, we can take averages. I'm sure a lot of people listening maybe have read average work-to-rest ratios in MMA, jiu-jitsu, whatever it is, and they look to replicate that in their training. But obviously, just replicating the average doesn't prepare you for the game of American football, doesn't prepare you for MMA, whatever it is, because obviously you have work-to-rest ratios above and below that. So how do you then program around that average then to prepare them for the entire game?
So if you look, especially if you look at the offensive and defensive data, there are very few plays longer than 10 seconds. It's extremely rare. So, occasionally though, and even it'll probably happen organically within the training. Like our big guys push our defensive and offensive linemen will push prowlers as part of their specific conditioning, and there'll probably be a couple reps when they're tired or whatever that take longer than 6 seconds. Maybe it's 8 to 10. So I think that it'll happen organically in our setting. But I do think there probably has to be a day, whether it's a circuit in the weight room or something, where you give them exposure to worst case scenario. I would put it on, we talked about waiving the volumes. I would put it on my higher volume week because, that's right before you deload. That's the week you're cooking with gas anyways. So just sprinkle that in. But it's just touching the exposure of how it feels.
Yeah. Do you have, you mentioned obviously you know how long the play is, I guess I think it was your defensive lineman there that extends to maybe 10 seconds. What about the rest intervals as well? Because obviously with my limited American football knowledge, like for example, Tom Brady marching the offense or marching the other team's defense down the field in the last couple of minutes and they're going play. Is that something you also have to take into account? Of course.
So I think traditionally in American football, so it's tempo, right? Exactly what you're talking about, our teams that play with tempo. That happens a ton in college football. There are certain offenses that play a pro-style, slower offense, certain offenses that play a faster tempo, like a spread, very popular in Texas. Traditionally, I think football coaches try to prepare for it in the week before practice. So then all of a sudden the practice, but you're digging your hole right then. You're actually probably making yourself more fatigued come game day because we know you can't really adapt in a week. So that's where, to your point, you probably have to sprinkle in bits. You definitely have to sprinkle in bits in the off season. If you do a good job of the bioenergetic side of the aerobic conditioning side, I think you give yourself a bigger buffer to handle it and to recover from it. Because it might just be one drive, but it's also going to be, if you're playing a team that plays tempo, it could be a whole game. And then if your guys don't have a good aerobic system, you're screwed.
For sure.
But again, I think you sprinkle that in on your worst case scenario day. Maybe one day you're giving them 2 seconds longer than the average up to the worst case. And maybe, on the other high volume week, you shorten your rest ratio slightly. The other thing to consider is, where else are you getting your conditioning? We think that you only conditioning during conditioning sessions, but really, a quote I steal from our director of sports, or he's our human performance director, he's our sports scientist, Andrew Altoff, is everything is conditioning. And he and I joke about it all the time, because you're in the weight room and it's, oh, we're lifting, but what are you doing in between sets? It's aerobic recovery. So, you got the heavy sled sprints that are popular right now. Well, if you complex them with unresisted sprints, all of a sudden your guys are tired. That's conditioning. I think that always needs to be remembered. I don't know if that really answers the question, but you got to think about it. I think.
Yeah, I mean, most people equate conditioning to fitness, but conditioning is about being prepared for your sport. So anything you're doing, technical training, whatever else you're doing in the gym is conditioning, because that's your preparation.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's just taking into account everything.
And I mean, as you guys in combat sports, the sport is conditioning. Really, you don't want to use it as conditioning, but when there's, I know that the sparring is used as conditioning. 100% it's conditioning.
Yeah, for sure. And then I guess for people listening who hear worst case scenario and they're like, what the hell is that? I guess gyms and teams have kind of popularized their terms for it. Fight Gone Bad, City Kickboxing has their Spider workout. That would be considered, I guess, worst case scenario. But you can also break it down, at least in my opinion, into more specific work. For example, within rugby, where I was working, you can break down, kind of peak periods within certain 1, 2, 3 minutes, and you can be like, okay, you usually have in defense, you might have 7 or 8 contact situations. So okay, that might be the peak within that 1 or 2 minutes, which means when we go to do training session, okay, we want to exceed that a bit. Maybe we'll do 10 contacts within that 1 to 2 minutes or whatever it is. So within fight sports, you could potentially, it might be a little difficult. I guess you could watch some footage and kind of count strikes thrown, shots taken, whatever it is, and then kind of build your own worst case scenario for maybe a really fast-paced fight. Like, for example, I think Khabib versus Justin Gaethje, Khabib walked down Justin Gaethje for a round and a half, and Gaethje was absolutely fucked. So that's maybe one way of looking at worst case scenario. Another way I looked at was, I actually took the averages from some of the research looking at work to rest ratios, and obviously they give standard deviations. So I just took kind of one standard deviation above, because we were looking essentially above 70% of what usually happens, or outside of 70% what usually happens. Okay, maybe use that as a threshold for your worst case scenario, maybe a little above that. So there's things in there you can kind of look to as well, rather than just putting together a random hardcore circuit and then hope that covers it.
Is it Darren Burgess? I think in his RTP, he essentially does that, if I remember correctly. He's built a calculator that gives all of his metrics, because he's in soccer. Yes, at least he was in soccer at the point that I watched this RTP presentation, and he has built every metric, and he has all of the standard deviations based off it, and he tries to prepare them for one standard deviation about exactly what you're talking about.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, you go.
So I was on the right track.
People say, and then it makes you feel better.
Exactly. Oh, awesome. Let's jump into a little bit of, I guess we covered somewhat of the conditioning side. NFL players are, basically pure power athletes. Combat sports, most of them require a lot of power, even though they've kind of got to repeat it over a longer period of time. But maybe let's cover some of the weight room ideas in terms of developing power. Is there anything, this is going to be a very general question because obviously it's individual and all that stuff, but is there anything in the weight room you really like for developing power? Maybe it's exercises, set reps, whatever it is.
So we do the heavy resisted sprints. That would be, because I think power is plane specific. So to start with that, we use the what's that strap or the 3D strap for our quarterbacks, and we do rotational power. It's a strap that wraps around your shoulder. You spin it, so it gets, and we'll throw a ton of med balls. We throw a ton of med balls.
Nice. Was that strap designed specifically for rotation, or was it just
it's called 3D strap? Okay. It's sweet, it's neon yellow, so everybody knows it looks sick. And it's awesome because you can do mobility with it. You
Nice.
can load T-spine mobility, and it's pretty cheap. It's awesome product. Here's my shameless plug for them. But so I think number one, power is plane specific. So
what by plane specific?
horizontal
you mean?
versus vertical, rotational, lateral in some cases. So we do lateral bounding. We do horizontal bounding. We do vertical jumps. We do loaded jumps, namely trap bar. I know a lot of teams in the NFL trap bar clean pull. We haven't done that. We regular clean pull.
Trap.
Yeah, so it's like a
Interesting.
trap bar shrug, kind of like a power shrug. Yeah,
Did a shrug.
I know that's really popular in the NFL.
Yeah.
We regular clean pull. We do everything on GymAware, so we'll put up targeted velocities. That's something that we didn't do prior to here, and I think that is so valuable, especially in this setting. You get guys from all different teams, all different training backgrounds, and they might show up week 4 and they're going to play that week. So, you can't test them. You can't, get on the GymAware. And if it's, there is a correlation between velocity and intensity. So we're clean pulling. Today we want it to be 2.0 peak velocity. Look at the screen, figure it out. And the intent you get from that is outstanding. Everybody is competing with our trap bar jumps. You in GymAware you can put up a leaderboard. So in OTAs, our trap bar jumps, we would just put 135 or 95 on all the bars. We'd put the leaderboard up and just watch the speed go up. You got guys jumping 3.8 meters per second with 135. It's absurd. And then the next guy sees it and gets mad when he doesn't. It's fantastic.
Yeah. It's awesome way to build competition.
I think also the thing that I've been learning recently that's interesting is if I clean pull or I clean, I'm going to improve concentric rate of force development. If I trap bar jump, I'm actually probably going to drive power more than the rate of force development. I think that there's this huge argument between trap bar jumps and cleans, all of this, and I think you need both.
Yeah.
You need your ballistic jumps. You need because you are training different things. The ground contact time can be different, and you need your unweighted plyos too.
If anyone's interested in, I guess, planes of movement force being plane specific, if you just search force vector theory on Google, you should find my article on Science for Sport about that. But do you want to maybe dive into differences between power and rate of force development? Because people listening will be like, okay, I want to be powerful, and they're like, rate of force development, what the hell is that? Or isn't that the same thing because I'm just producing force quickly?
Yeah, so I think it's one of the things that you probably want to be able to test on a force plate. Now, if you can't, I understand. Or like G-Flight, something that is giving you ground contact time. But so in the case between the two, right, like the clean, you're getting a higher spike initially, then you get the unweighting phase. And the nice thing about the clean, if you catch it, you get the eccentric rate of force development as well. Whereas the trap bar jump, the ground contact time, that the contraction time is longer, but the output is greater. So that is driving up your peak power versus your RFD.
So essentially, you're spending more time on the ground, so you have more time to produce force on the jump, and then you have a little less with the power clean. That's it. Gotcha.
More like an
so I guess that's kind of your reasoning. Yeah. Now you're good. So that's kind of like your reasoning for and the argument of should you do Olympic weightlifting for combat sports? The argument is, hey, if you have good technique or you have the time to learn it, use both jumps and Olympic weightlifting because they're going to give you two different
and go throw med balls and do your regular plyos. Do it all.
Yeah. Do it all. So I guess within a session then, are you looking at kind of like a vertical integration model? For anyone listening, vertical integration is kind of just like touching all different qualities at once. Are you looking at doing that in one session, or are you kind of planning maybe it's a strength day and then a power day?
We vertically integrate. I'm Canadian, so if it's Charlie Francis, I have to. But yes, we. That's exactly what we do. So we'll do a total body day. Sorry, I've got pop-ups popping up. We'll go like total body, and it'll be. So our first day we use as a primer, because in the off season in the NFL, traditionally it's 4 days, but it's all 4 in a row because guys leave on Fridays. So the Monday we'll use as a primer. It'll be more upper body. It'll be our faster conditioning. So we run these what are called metabolics. They are short. We run them on about a 6 to 35 work to rest ratio. And that'll be on the Monday. And then they'll do some sort of upper body. We might like push press on that day. So you get a little, I
always had that in my upper body day too.
So that gives you the stimulus for Tuesday, which will be our max velocity day. So we'll max our max velocity with our weight room power, and then with a lower body lift. We'll do our big bench press on Monday too, so that's also part of the primer. We might do a few sets of push press and then bench. But so yes, that's exactly what we'll do. And then our Thursday is our heavy resisted excel day, and we'll clean or trap our jump both of those days. We will trap our deadlift. We will speed squat. We'll single leg squat. All that stuff.
Nice. I guess, how do you then balance the volume of the work you do in the gym with the technical training? Obviously, with those weeks, do you guys have technical training in those weeks as well?
It can't be with us. Like, our guys are not allowed to have throw a football or touch football in our facility in the off season. So
that's so fun.
It's a unique challenge. Now it's different in OTAs, because in OTAs we actually have a bit of both. So then we will adapt what the weight room is doing, what the training is doing to the field, because football is number one, of course. The sport, the main thing is the main thing. So we'll talk to the guys about what our quarterbacks go and throw with a different coach or with receivers. So we'll talk to them. Our receivers will go run routes. And we'll talk to them what days are best to go, what days are best to go work with their outside coaches, what days are best to run their longer routes versus their shorter routes. And then if a guy is going to go and run a bunch of deep balls, like, we'll cut his speed yardage absolutely in the training session.
Yeah.
Now, it's tough when you can't put a GPS on them in their session and go see what's going to happen, but you can guess. And we have awesome guys, and I think we've educated them fairly well to this point. So they start to know what it feels like, what it looks like, and they can say, "Oh, I'm going to go do this." The other, because it's all voluntary, like, they have to give you the information, but they are more than happy to. I think they trust us at this point. So it's like, this is what I'm probably going to be doing. How would you plan it?
Nice. I guess maybe for any of the combat athletes listening, maybe they've gone through a hard couple of sessions within their sport, and then they have maybe strength training on the gym later that evening. How would you scale back the, I guess, gym training based on, for example, maybe they had a huge workload on the field?
I would cut volume. I think it's volume that kills you.
Okay.
It isn't.
And by volume, are we talking
both?
Rep sets or yeah.
I calculate total reps in a session. That's how we do it here. So we calculate total reps that count, that are at above 50 to 60%. I know the Chinese weightlifters only count above 70%, but that's their sport. But we calculate total reps that count. So maybe on the doctor you're supposed to do 4 sets of 5 on trap bar deadlift. Well, come in and hit 4 sets of 3, but go touch the intensity that you wanted, because that's going to be what really pushes the needle and drives up those capacities, those capabilities.
Yeah, I think it's where some people get it wrong, is they want to pull back, but they pull back not only how much they're doing, but they pull back how heavy, or I guess how fast they move too within the gym. And then obviously you kind of lose everything when you're doing that, versus, hey, even if you just do 2 sets of 2 or 2 sets of 3 just because whatever has happened that day and you reached that intensity that you needed or whatever it is. It's better than coming in and being like, okay, I'm just going to do a couple of sets, but way lighter.
You got to give your athletes what they're not good at. So when they're practicing their sport in a fatigued state, they probably aren't getting a max strength. Maybe a wrestler is, maybe an offensive lineman is, but probably not getting a max strength output, and they're probably not getting a max stretch shortening cycle output. So if you're going to do a plyometric, maybe it's, just 1 or 2 sets of your depth jump or whatever you're prepared for that day, whatever you have planned. But you got to give them what they're not going to have.
Yeah, for sure. That's a recurring thing that's come up on this podcast too, which is great. But before I take you back to your time working with wrestling a bit, I'm going to put you on the spot and ask you your opinion on the off-season training that a lot of these players get on Instagram. When they're away from what do they call it? Is it summer training or whatever it is? Summer off-season training?
I think it's tough. I think it's very tough. I think it's tough for the players to know where to go. I think it's tough because you have to put out the fancy stuff on Instagram in order to get the players. And I also think it's getting a lot better. Mm-hmm. In the last, I mean, I haven't been in it that long, but in the last 3-4 years, the popularity in speed training has just exploded, right? There's now a speed coach everywhere. And for the most part, that's probably a good thing. Because instead of it just being, I'm going and I'm doing my conjugate wave and I'm not running, they're running, they're on the track. Yeah, they might do a ton of ladder drills that day, but if they're going and hitting some max velocity sprinting and they're going and changing direction, and it might look crazy when the guy throws a ball at them and they have to cut, but at least it's a reactive cut. I think there are a lot of good things coming. Now you still see probably too much of the, unbalanced, whatever, balance training, physio ball. But again, that is what the guys want. So you just have to figure out how to mix it in. And it's hard to watch Instagram and say, this is bad because of this exercise. Like, well, maybe this is what the player wanted to do, and they clean pulled or trap bar deadlifted before, right?
Because how much say do the players usually have, I guess, a lot of power in that in terms of what they, I guess, want to do in training? But no, I'm assuming not.
Well, so even with us, it's a conversation. I think the key is educating them on what is important, right? Like, guys, nobody wants to lift heavy when they're sore, but if you have tendon problems, you have groin problems, whatever, like, yeah, you need heavy, slow load, but that explanation needs to be, that conversation needs to happen. They need to trust you that this is going to be uncomfortable right now, but it's going to make you healthier longer. That, I think, is key number one. And then to their off-season training, I don't know because I've never been in that sector. But I'm sure they have some say because they're paying. Right? Like, they can go somewhere else if they don't like it. Also, and the other thing, I think that as in our situation, you have to do a good job of educating your players, but also giving them, if they ask, you can say, these are places we recommend that you go. Because there are a ton of places that are phenomenal. Like, I think down by you, there's a ton of great places. Up in Dallas, there's, Sports Academy is up in Frisco. APEC in Fort Worth is Bobby Shroop is as good as it gets. There's tons of good places in Florida. There's, Exos. There's all. So, there's good, like, we have guys that go back to Jersey and they go to great places and train. So it's partly educating them on where to go.
Just depends who you go to.
Nice. And when they, again, I think it all comes back to them trusting you. That's the key, especially at this level, because they're adults. Like, these guys are the same age as me, and a number of them. So we're all working for a common goal. It just needs to be understood.
Yeah, fair enough. I just want to go back a little bit to when you're working. I mean, you're working with 16 teams, so it might be a little difficult to really nail down exactly what you were doing with the wrestling guys. But maybe just a general overview of how you look to program for wrestling, kind of like maybe the demands or determinants of wrestling that you identified that you thought were important, and then kind of how you tackled those, I guess, physical capacities.
It was very different. Because I would only work with them maybe 2 days a week with the scheduling, with everything. And at the Division III level in the off season, everything is completely optional. So what would happen is the guys would come in, we would do the big rock lifts, whether, chin ups, squat, or deadlift, whatever. Like, I always give that option, or at least I try to. We would do row, like all the big rocks. It's 2 days. You get 2 full body days. But the other thing that we would do, and this is, so my father is a ski racing coach, downhill ski racing coach, and he does all the strength and conditioning. And his mentor is this older gentleman, this Russian gentleman who lives in Boston. His name is Igor Burdenko. And he worked in the Soviet Union and defected to the United States. And he has this training method that is completely different than anything I've ever seen. And it's land and water based, and it's almost entirely movement based. It's like the loading is all surgical tubing from a belt or body weight or kettlebell. And then in the pool, you go in the deep end and you wear flotation belts, and it's running, it's moving in every direction. You're changing speeds. If you do it forwards, you have to do it backwards. And the key is posture and alignment. That is the most important quality number one is posture alignment. So back to with the wrestlers, is the thing I found the most is that they did too much. These guys are all borderline overtrained all the time because that's what makes them them, right? That's the key. And so what I would do with them is we would go, one of the days maybe we go in the wrestling room and we do more gymnastics based, rolling, crawling, maybe even some more like plyometric stuff, but some more coordination stuff. The other thing is the hand-eye coordination isn't there. That's not key in the sport. So we would do some fun, goofy-looking stuff just to give them variability, to give them variety. And then we would go in the pool, in the deep end. You float, you get decompression, you can do more coordination, you do all this balance stuff. And because in that setting, these guys were going to go get everything else on their own. They were going to go do too much. How can I unload them? How can I make them better? How can I make them feel better? So I would say I took almost the reverse approach into it. But that was in that setting what I felt like was best.
It's really interesting. So what kind of stuff were you doing in the pool then? You mentioned obviously you float. Only thing I can think of is aqua jump.
At the beginning, it looks similar. Like you just walk. So it's flotation belt, you're vertical, you start double arm, single, and walking legs, and you want to keep good posture. Like you're going to think when people aqua jog, they get in that cycle position, right? But it's no, I need up tall, I need full range of motion. So I'll go forwards, I'll go backwards. I'll go alternating arm and leg, forwards and backwards. I'll go sideways. I'll walk with 360s. I will walk in toe touch. I'll do the splits in every direction, every 3 steps. And then we'll also use flotation barbells, flotation dumbbells. And the long ones, you can stand on them. You can do squats on them. So there's a huge variety. Oh, wow. I think my dad has this book that he has compiled over the last 30 years of his exercises, and he has like 30,000 exercises. It might be 100,000 exercises, but it's just,
dude, you need to get that online or something.
It's funny because it's the way, because the exercises, because there's so much variety, he writes them out the way he thinks about them. So it might be like supine, T position, whatever the exercise is. So he and I read it, and it's like, oh yeah, I know exactly what's going on. And then someone else would say, "This," but it's every
Yeah, I
day
was gonna say.
his skiers get in the pool post training. So when I was at that was the goal. We would get the guys in the pool as much as possible. Even here, we use the pool for recovery. Post game, it's getting more popular.
Yeah.
But I had never heard of anybody using the pool every day or that frequently until Randy Huntington was recently on a podcast, and he talked about using the pool every single day.
Yep.
I'd be so curious to see what he does, because I've never really seen any. I've seen a little bit similar, but I've never seen anything quite the same.
Yeah. Yeah. The pool, in rugby, the pool's popular, but you don't generally use, I mean, it's an accessibility issue as well. You don't typically use the pool every day, but I mean, I've done some stuff, even working with 7s and 15s, we often play games in the pool.
Yeah.
So different, almost like water polo, essentially, but different variations of that. And it kind of gets the guys moving. It's extra conditioning anyway. We used to actually go here in Austin. I was working with the Austin team. Our Mondays, we would come and that would essentially be a recovery day, because our field was literally, in Texas, our field was like concrete because it was so dry. And we're like, well, we can't have them running all the time on the field after playing Saturday and then having Tuesday, Thursday training as well, because they were pretty much semi-pro. So we'd take them to the pool, and I would do 3-minute increase in aerobic power intervals from James Smith. So it'd be every 30 seconds increase intensity to the last 30 seconds is 95 to 100%. And it's easy in the pool, jogging on the spot. You're in the pool, recovering. It's cooler than being outside in the Texas heat. You're getting that aerobic work done. It's getting blood flow, recovery, all that kind of stuff. So there's the pool is a great option.
For sure. And the other thing is you have the hydrostatic pressure in the pool, right? So you're actually getting more return to the heart. You're getting probably more left ventricular hypertrophy. You're getting all these other benefits. You're getting increased cardiac output. The reason we do the floating is you get the spinal decompression. That's in this population. I'm sure in your population, everybody is so compressed. You're constantly in contact. You're constantly compressing yourself, lifting heavy.
Yeah.
You are, you just see the posture. These guys are compressed. They are extended. They are everything. Their whole life is compression. Everything is tension. And it's how am I going to counteract it? So you can do Eldoa. You can whatever. But it's how much easier is it to go in the pool? That's that's awesome. I think it'll probably be the next big fad within combat sports, even with just athletes in general. That probably someone will sell good for them.
A pool program or something.
We should do it.
Good for them. Yeah, I'm gonna get on it now.
Take your guys to Barton Springs. You're all set.
Oh yeah, Barton Springs is
probably
damn
too
nice.
cool.
Damn cold, but damn good.
When it's 110 degrees, that's how you'll be fine.
Oh yeah, for sure. Well, I think I've actually gone through a whole range of questions for you that hopefully the audience has found helpful. If anyone wants to follow, I guess, what you're doing,
I'm on
or anything
Twitter,
that you're doing,
Instagram,
where can they find you?
Barbeau Training. It's my last name, Training. You can email me. I would say those two are the best way to get a hold of me, though. I'm on them regularly. I respond to everything. I love talking training whenever possible. Can't be
Sweet.
It's the best job ever.
Nice. For sure. And I'll put those down in the description too. So if you're watching on YouTube, it will be there, Spotify, whatever else. It'll also be there. And I guess if you're keen to talk to Thomas about more training stuff, hit him up.
Thank you. This is fantastic.
He's always keen. No, perfect. Thanks for coming on. I really appreciate it.